So yeah, I didn't increase it in a massive amount, so perhaps 2 sets after 1 week. I did this gradually by increasing the repetitions, something a bit smaller, by 2 every week, and then the sets would be on a larger scale, so every 3 weeks. Um, this just means that I'm not overloading the client too much to the point where they could become injured, um, or the muscle tears that occur from this training would be too big, where it causes pain and discomfort, as opposed to ones that can be easily um, relayed, and where the protein resynthesis can occur. So I did it progressively in small amounts, where I was increasing the repetitions and sets to moderately, um, for what the client could tolerate, where they can adapt, um, and their body systems become more efficient, so their muscles would experience hypertrophy and they would begin to lose weight, and there would be bettering of the efficiency of their body systems. Another strength I felt with my program writing was variability. So I adapted the activities within the sessions each week to prevent tedium. So the actual activities within the interval training were changed each week. So perhaps instead of doing jump squats, they did burpees instead. I made sure that they weren't doing the same series of exercises every week. As I feel that if they were doing the same thing every week, it becomes predictable, it becomes boring because you know what's coming. There's nothing new or refreshing for the client, meaning that they're less engaged and less motivated, so they're not going to work as hard. So I felt that variability was a strength because I provided variability from week to week in terms of the within the session themselves. Um, I was also specific to the performance targets. I made sure that the sessions would be specific to helping each and every of one of those targets that we'd set. So the sessions were specific to leg power, for a rugby player who needs leg power to drive forward in a sprint. Also, the high intensity interval training helped them lose weight, um, meaning that they had that body composition of high muscle mass, low fat percentage, replicative of a rugby player. Um, so yeah, I felt it was specific to not only the performers' targets and goals, but also to their sport, because it was focused on their legs, something that is very important for a rugby player, specifically when they're sprinting. Um, and that body composition again relates to that of a rugby player. Finally, I also felt that another strength was that the progress was measurable. Um, so I tested throughout the program on the 3rd week and on the 6th week as well. So that was the standing broad jump to test power, and the BMI test and skin caliper test, for in relation to the fat percentage and muscle percentage. Um, so yeah, I felt that that was a strength, as it allowed me to kind of track their progress throughout the course of the program, um, meaning that I could adapt it if it wasn't working, um, and meaning that I could check if it was working. So my areas for improvement in terms of program writing, I felt that although I did provide variation, I could have provided more variation. I felt that my variation within the session was a strength. However, I literally didn't vary the type of training at all. So I did have different training, but I kept plyometric training throughout the whole course of the 6 weeks. and that could become very boring because as much as you can change the activities within the session, they're still very similar. The nature of the activities are very similar, like jump squats, burpees are very similar, which would mean it could become very tedious. They'd lose motivation because of that tedium, meaning that they're not working as hard as they could be, and again, not adapting in the way that I want them to be, and not reaching their targets in the long term because they're not working at the rate that I want them to be. Another area for improvement is I felt that I could have tested more regularly. Yes, it was a strength that I did measure progress by testing, but the tests were on the 3rd week and the 6th week, which is all good, because obviously you're not going to make that much adaptation every week, but no matter how small the adaptation, I feel that to track that would be really beneficial. We perhaps see if they're working harder in one week than another. It just means that tracking progress it becomes more easy. That means that I can set more short-term goals as opposed to long-term goals. Becoming dependent on long-term goals is perhaps not as easy as having something to motivate you each individual week. So yeah, I felt that if I'd have tested more regularly, I could have tracked progress more easily, and set more short-term goals which would motivate the client further. I also felt that I could have shown more creativity in my cooldowns. So the cooldowns I created were fairly similar through the 6 weeks. A lot of them were kind of based around running through a series of cones and doing a series of the same stretches each week, which could have led to them putting less effort into the cool down because they become bored of it because they know what's coming, and there's nothing new. And obviously if they're putting less effort into the cool down, it's going to be ineffective, and put them at risk of injury after the session. Therefore, I feel that if I'd have varied it more, been more creative throughout the course of the 6 weeks, and given them new refreshing cooldowns each week, then it would have been more exciting, which would motivate the client further as they've got something to look forward to at the end of it, rather than just seeing it as kind of a chore of something that they do each and every week. Lastly, I felt that I could have provided more alternatives. I had only one alternative for each session. I didn't have it consistently throughout, which means that if I didn't have the equipment for that alternative, as well as the equipment for the already planned main session, for example, or warm up, then I had no backup plan. I didn't have anything to do with it. I would have had to wing it, which obviously could put the client at risk because I haven't set out a safe and effective session. I also didn't provide much differentiation within the sessions. So, for example, I didn't provide different versions of an activity to provide different levels or abilities. I could have perhaps provided an option of regular squats or jumping squats, for example. So, given the client that option of a more easier exercise or a more challenging one, depending on what they feel that they are capable of. That obviously would have provided differing levels so that the client can choose the easier option if they can't physically do the harder one. Perhaps there might have been an injury or something to prevent them from doing that certain version. So yeah, I felt I could have provided more differentiation or alternatives within the sessions. overall, as a whole, I felt that my program writing was almost fairly. It was good because it was well formatted. It was effective, um, for what the goals of the client were, and it would have got them to reach the point that they wanted to, um, effectively. However, I felt that generally I could have made it slightly more enjoyable by providing more variations, more alternatives, and differentiation, for the client. As yes, it would have reached them their goal in the long term, which would bring them happiness, but I want them to enjoy the sessions really and to look forward to it so that they continue perhaps down that route or down using that program in the future. Um, so yeah, overall, I felt that it was I was effective with my program writing and, effective in leading my session, but I could have made it slightly more enjoyable, for the client, which would encourage them to participate in that physical activity or that session further in the future.